Okay, so good morning. And today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Tet, the last and final daf of Bava Metzia. God willing, we will finish Bava Metzia, and hopefully, I encourage us all to sort of find our a group that we can, for whom we can create a siyum and celebrate this wonderful achievement. Really, it's really quite amazing what you can get done. Before we got started, I was talking with Stan here about how just one little step, in order to get anywhere, you have to take one little step. That one little step, if we take one foot after another, we can get there in the end. So really very exciting to finish Bava Metzia today. We are at the Mishnah at the top of Yud Kuf Yud Chet Amud Bet. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Just realized that I didn't open the relevant email, so it'll take just an extra second. And here we go. Okay, let's move that into the center. And now here we go, share the screen, and here it is, and share, and there we go. Okay, so we're going to pick up with the mission at the top of Kuf Yud Chet Amud Bet, and finish Bava Metzia today. So having dealt with hazards that fall into a public domain in the last Mishnah, we continue with the concept of hazards that are put into public spaces. And so let's take a look. So Hamotzi Zevel Rishus Harabim. If one takes out manure and puts it into the public thoroughfare. So Hamotzi Motzi, the one who takes it out. Mizavel, and the one who does the fertilization, Mizavel, he'll take it and do the fertilization. Now, that phraseology is a little bit awkward, so thankfully Rashi really helps us here and explains it. Take a look at the first Rashi, third line down in the narrow lines. Hamotzi Motzi Mizavel. So Kilomer Einu Rishai Oso Sham, meaning that what the Mishnah is trying to teach us is that you're not allowed to leave the manure there. Elazem Motzio, the one who has it in their field, takes it out. Min harefes, from the barn, from the stalls, l'rishus harabim, and he puts it out into the public thoroughfare. V'hanos, and the one who lifts it up and takes it away, Yehe Mizuman, should be prepared, to pick it up, to lift it, and to carry it to Lisadeb, to the field, Lugana, Gina, and to the garden, Lizevel, in order to fertilize those locations. So that's the idea. The idea is that you cannot leave it there at all, because we're worried that somebody will get injured as a result. Okay, but you can use it as a transfer point. That's what the Mishnah is telling us. You can use it as a transfer point, but don't store it there. Ein shorin tit b'rishos harabim. So when it comes to the soaking of clay, you can't do that in the public thoroughfare. And Rashi explains, Ein shorin tit, the next Rashi, Mikomot yesh, there are places where sheshorin oto yamim rabim, where you soak the clay for a good amount of time in order to soften it up and in order to make it more usable. Tzibur, that's what the community would do b'makom echad, in one location, and you can't. And so the point is that although communities would want to do that, that is not an appropriate thing to do in a public thoroughfare. You might want to do it in one of the side courts, etc., but not in the middle of a busy street, as we say. Okay. Ve'ein lovnim levanim, and you can't make bricks in public. And again, Rashi helps us out, and Rashi explains, Ein lovnim levanim lefisha misha otan liyavshan. The point is that part of the process of making the bricks is to keep them in a particular location in order for them to dry out. So what would you do? Shishotach hatit bikarka chalaka. You would spread the mud, the clay out on flat ground, smooth ground. Ka'ove halavenim. The height of it would be the thickness of the bricks that you're trying to make. V'choretz, and then you'd cut into it, bo charitzot shasi ve'arav. You would cut lengthwise and widthwise cuts into it. Kemidas halavenim, at the size of the different bricks that you're trying to create. Umenichan sham, and then you would leave them there ad sheyavshu, until they dried. And that way you would end up with nice, solid, wonderful bricks. So, but that's not an appropriate thing to do in a public thoroughfare, because people could trip on it and hurt themselves, or slip on it and fall. Aval govlin tit b'rishos harab. But you are allowed to knead the clay in a public thoroughfare. And Rashi explains v'govlin tit l'tate miyad b'binyan, that if you have, you think about the cement trucks, right? So the cement trucks have the spinning thing. That's effectively doing what we're talking about here, right? The kneading of the clay right before you put it into the building. Indeed, just a fact that is an interesting fact that I learned as an antitrust lawyer for many years, that those drums of the cement trucks, they can only turn a certain amount of times until there's nothing to be done. The cement is solid already, and you can't do anything about it. So they have to come from a specific, can't come from too far away, because the drums can only turn a certain amount of times until it's too late and the cement is no longer useful. So too, the point is that in order to make this, to make the clay useful as a building material, it needs to be done near the site of the building. And so as a result, that's why we're going to allow it to be done here. However, when it comes to the bricks, avalo levanim, you cannot use that clay to make bricks, because those bricks don't need to be made in Rishus Harabim. So as a result, that's why you would not, you can't do that with bricks. Okay. Habona b'Rishus Harabim, if you're building in Rishus Harabim, and here the Meiri clarifies that we're not talking about building a structure in the Rishus Harabim, because that's Rishus Harabim. You're not allowed to build it, but rather your property abuts Rishus Harabim, and you need to use to put some of the scaffolding, so to speak, in Rishus Harabim. So that we're going to allow, but hamevi avanim mevi, bona, meaning if you need to use the Rishus Harabim as a temporary, momentary depot, exactly, excellent word, I like that word, that's okay. As Rashi says, bona, mikabel miyad hamevi ubona, meaning as long as the person is accepting from it right away, from the and taking it and building immediately, that's going to be fine. Okay. So again, hamevi avanim, maybe the person who's bringing the stones can bring them, bona, and then the builder builds them with them immediately. Okay. V'im hizik, and nonetheless, even if all of these things are done, you take the manure right away. You only need the clay. You don't do anything. You take the stones right away. Nonetheless, if somebody were to trip on the stone or fall in the fertilizer and get injured, the imhizik mishalim mashahizik, you have to pay the damages. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, af misakein hu es melachto lifnei shloshim yom. You can even do preparations for 30 days, meaning that there are 2 points of disagreement. One, storage. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel allows storage up to 30 days, while the Tana Kama forbids any storage. It has to go right from the location in public directly into the hands of the builder or into the hands of the fertilizer. So you cannot leave it there at all. And on the front of liability. The Tanna Kama says you're liable for any damages, while Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel only imposes liability after 30 days. As Rashi says, misakin, you can prepare. Mizamein, you can prepare birashos harabim in the public thoroughfare. Ve'eno chayav b'nezikin, and you're not liable for any damages that occur during that 30-day period. So that's our Mishnah. So let's take a look and see what the Gemara says. And the Gemara tries to say, hey, can we say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda? Well, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? For that, we got to jump into the Gemara. So, Lema Masnisin Deloka Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe we should be able to say that our Mishnah is not, in fact, like Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya, because we have the following brisa where Rabbi Yehuda says the following: Rabbi Yehuda Omer Bishas Hotzas Zvalim, during the season when people take out manure to the Rishos Harabim, meaning in the winter time. Adam Motzi Zivlo L'Rishos Harabim. You can put out the manure in the public thoroughfare. Vitzovro Kol Shloshim Yom, and you can pile it up for 30 days. And Rashi tells us, Vitzovro Kol Shloshim Yom, meaning Mishloshim Lishloshim Choser Vitzovro Kadesh Yehei Nishaf Yafeh. That the idea is that every 30 days you can take it out and put it in order that, because what are you trying to do? You're trying to get this manure and crushed up. You want it to be stepped on because it will become better fertilizer if it all gets mixed up with the mud and all the other gunk that's out there in the street. Now all of a sudden it becomes good, useful fertilizer, and so you want that crushing process. Kadesh Yehei, as Rashi, as the Gemara back in the Gemara, second wide line in the Gemara, Kadesh Yehei Nishuf biragle adam of biragle behema, because we want it all crushed by the feet of by the trampling of the people and the animals. Sha'al manas kain hinchil Yoshua liyisrael es haaretz, because it was on this basis, on the basis of understanding that we can each put stuff out in the public thoroughfare when we need it. That was the basis on which Yoshua gave Eretz Yisrael to the Jewish people, divided Eretz Yisrael up, and so as a result, that is a permitted action. So now, doesn't that disagree with our Tanna Kama in our Mishnah? After all, the Tanna Kama in our Mishnah says that you are not allowed to do this. Well, maybe not. Maybe we can say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. And Moda Rabbi Yehuda she'im hizik chayav l'shalom. And what Rabbi Yehuda is saying is that there are effectively two parts to the rule. There's an affirmative prohibition, meaning I'm not allowed to slap you, right? Now, maybe if I slap you and pay you for it, maybe we should say that I'm allowed to do it. But of course not. That's not the point. Is that there are 2 parts to our action. There's whether or not it's permitted, and then there are the ramifications. So what we can be saying is that in this context, you're allowed to do the action, but you still have to pay for the ramifications. So maybe that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying here. But that doesn't work because v'hatanan, meaning Moda Rabbi Yehuda, Shim Hizik Chayav L'Shalom. He admits that if you do cause damage, you're liable. But we have another Mishnah. Now, this is not a direct quote from the Mishnah, but it's a paraphrase of a Mishnah in Bava Kama. And that Mishnah says, Moda Rabbi Yehuda B'ner Chanukah Shehu Patur. That Rabbi Yehuda agrees that if you light your Chanukah menorah in the street, and then somebody comes by and gets lit by it, and damages happen, you're not liable. Because he acted with permission. So my lav rishus debeistin, doesn't the permission here refer to the permission of the court, and therefore any act that's permitted by law, therefore there's no liability? Whoa, no, not necessarily. So you have not. Well, maybe our answer that Rabbi Yehuda would still say that you have to pay for the damages applies, and the law in connection with the Chanukiah is not actually a contradiction, but rather rishus de mitzvah. The reason in that context that we're not going to make you liable is because the commandment of the rabbis to light the candles is what allows you to avoid liability. Still, the Gemara persists because Vahatanya.
Before that, just note that this is one of the rare mentions of Hanukkah in the
Yes,
entire Shas.
correct, correct. Obviously, it's not the primary source. The primary source is based on that Mishnah in Bava Kama Samach Bet Amabet, where we actually deal with the damage of Chanukiot in the public thoroughfare. So you're absolutely right. It's a little more common in the Gemara than it is in the Mishnah, but it's still very rare, and so you're absolutely right that we should highlight it. I guess probably next time that we pass, God willing, in about 7.5 years, maybe it'll be around Hanukkah when we learn this, and we can
That's
call
right.
it a nice Daf Yomi coincidence. Okay,
Yeah,
so the Gemara again persists and says, one second, you can't necessarily interpret that. I mean, you can interpret that Mishnah like that, but there's still another statement of Rabbi Yehuda that seems to make it clear that we're not talking about the permission of a mitzvah, but rather permission of a court. So Vahatanya kol elish amru mutarin lekalkel b'rishos harabim, that anything where the rabbis say you're allowed to cause some kind of damage, some kind of bad thing to exist in the public domain, even though you're allowed to do it, im hizik chayav l'shalom. If it causes damage, you're liable to pay. That's the Tanakama. But the Rabbi Yehuda poter. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, if the rabbis allow you to do it, you're not going to be liable. So now we really have a tough situation because clearly in our Mishnah, the rabbis are allowing you to put, even just temporarily, the Zevel in the Rishos Harabim, and the Tanakama isn't causing any responsibility. So as a result, we've actually successfully proven something by the Gemara. Ella mechavarta masnisin deloka Rabbi Yehuda. It's clear that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now that we've noted that Rabbi Yehuda is not like the Tanakama in our Mishnah, Abaye makes a statement that highlights that there are actually three people who disagree with the Tanakama in our Mishnah. Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda.
So Rabbi Yehuda is poter in all cases that if he's hizik, there's no he's no we're not
if
machayim.
there's permission for you to do something in Rishus Harabim, then you're not going to be liable. That's what he's saying. So it's not remember, he only allows you to put the Zevel in the public thoroughfare during the seasons where one does so, only for 30 days. You can't just leave it out there forever. You have to refresh it every 30 days. And as long as you refresh it every 30 days, so then you would not be liable.
Well, that's the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, right?
100%. And that's exactly what Abaye is going to tell us right now. Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and he's going to now add Rabbi Shimon, Kulus Virulu. All of them agree. Kol makom shenasnu lo chachamim rishus v'hizik pater. Anytime the rabbis give you permission to take a step and to do something, well then, if it causes damage, we're not going to say that you're liable. Rabbi Yehuda, Hada Amran. We just cited the statement of Rabbi Yehuda that makes that point. Similarly, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel did Tanan, as we learned in our Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Omer Af Misakin Hu Es Milachto Lifnei Shloshim Yom. He can put his stuff in the public thoroughfare for 30 days. And here we understand how Rashi was able to tell us in the Mishnah that you're not chayav ben nezikin, because it's clear that that's what Abaye is saying. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you're not chayav with nezikin. So we have now two of the opinions very clear. Now we get the third of the opinions. Rabbi Shimon, how do we know about him? Rabbi Shimon did Tanan, because we have the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Bava Basra, so God willing, it's a forecast for us for a couple of weeks from now. Haya ma'amido ba'aliyah, if you are setting up, and it's referring to an oven. If you're setting up an oven in an upstairs floor, you need to put 3 tfachim of plaster underneath it in order to avoid having the heat of the oven damage the roof of the person who lives below. Ubekira, and when it comes to a stove, tefach, 1 tefach is sufficient. The heat of a stove is a little less intense, and so as a result, because it's the intention of a stove is to have the heat go up as opposed to stay in an oven. And so as a result, 1 tefach is sufficient. But the Tanakama says, "V'im hizik," if it causes damage, even though you've done what we were asking of you to do, mishalom masha hizik, you have to pay the amount that was damaged. However, Rabbi Shimon, and of course, here's the Rabbi Shimon that we're referring to. Rabbi Shimon Omer, lo amru kol shiurim halalu. No, the rabbis only gave all of these measurements, ella she'im hizik pater milashalim, only in order to tell us that if you did do damage, you would not be liable for paying. So we see that there are 3 different opinions that would say this. Now, in general, my understanding is that we do not, in fact, paskin like any. This is one of the few instances that we seem not to paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in a Mishnah, but rather we seem to paskin not like that you have to that you're doing damage. Now, at the same time, it does seem like we allow you to put out the zevel for 30 days in Rishos Harabim, like Rabbi Yehuda says. But again, it seems like if it causes damage, we are going to say that you are liable. So that's again, just it seems like that's the way we paskin. I haven't gone through the halacha in detail. Okay, so that brings us to the next piece, and we are going to now address liability during the building process by quoting a brisa. So Tana Rabbanan, hachatzav shemasar l'satas. So basically, what we're going to see in this brisa is no chiddush until the very last line. That everybody is liable if they drop something and hurt somebody. If we're going to be talking about working with stones, and if they drop something on your toe and you break your toe, they're going to be liable. The person who drops it is going to be liable. That's really not a surprise, right? I mean, but we're going to see that there's joint liability at the very end of the process. If after it's put on the building, it then falls. So let's, and then we're going to try to explain why that is. So Tana Rabbanan, hachatzav shemasor l'tzatos hasatos chayev, that when the person who's the quarrier, who's quarrying the stone out of the earth, so until he hands it over to the stone cutter, he's going to be liable for any damage that the stone creates. Hasatas shemasor l'chamar hachamar chayev. Similarly, the stone cutter, until he gives it to the donkey driver, he's going to be liable. Hachamar shemasor l'katav, the donkey driver who's giving it to the carrier, hakasav chayev. So then
no, it says that the sata is chayav even after.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize. The second
once he gave it to
it's once it happens. Thank you. So the point is that once the person who's the quarrier gives it to the stone cutter, so now the stone cutter is going to be the one liable for any damage.
The Mishnah or the Braita doesn't talk anything about where the chatzav is chayav. It doesn't mention that.
Correct, but the implication is until he hands it over to the stone cutter, so then the chatzav would be chayav. But you're absolutely right. I misread it. So until once he hands it over to the stone cutter, so now the stone cutter is going to be liable. Once the stone cutter hands it over to the donkey driver is going to be liable. Once the donkey driver hands it over to the porter, to the carrier, so then the hakasav chayav. Then the one who's carrying it is going to be liable. Hakatav shemasa lebanai, once the carrier gives it to the builder, so then habanai chayiv, the builder is going to be liable. Habanai shemasa la'adrichal, so once the builder gives it to the bricklayer, adrichal chayiv, the bricklayer is liable. V'im haniach even al hadimos v'hizika, but if the stone gets put on the top of the wall and now it causes damage, kulan chayavin l'shalim, all of them are liable. But 1 second, the Gemara wonders, we have a brisa of Tanya, achron chayiv. We have a brisa that says only the last one will be chayiv after you put after the brick has been laid by the bricklayer. V'chulan peturin, and all the others are not liable. So how can you say that all of them are liable? So lo kasha, kan beschirus, kan bekablanus. That one case is talking about hiring, and one case is talking about one can call it a job work. So let's take a look, and Rashi helps us. Beschiros, when you hire them for their specific labor on an individual basis, ha'achron chayev. Then that's where the second brisa will teach that only the last one is liable. But bekablanut, when they're all working together, kulan chayavin. So, and Rashi explains as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of Rashi, bekablanut, kula at the very end of the line, kulan chayavim, all of them are liable. Whenever it doesn't fall from the hand of an individual. If it falls from the hand of an individual, so then that individual is liable. The al kulan, because it's the responsible of all lishmor. It's shetehei miyusheves yafe, because they've essentially all been hired. It's like a contract, right? You've hired the group to perform the construction process. Now, they've divided up that process how they choose, but you hired them as a team. And so as a result, if the fact that they wanted to divide it up the way they wanted to divide it up, when it's not one person's responsibility, it's all of their responsibility. So that's an important aspect, that when you want to hire somebody, you want to make sure to hire them bekablanut as opposed to beschirut. Okay, so that brings us now to the final Mishnah of Bava Metzia.
I wonder if there's a time factor here. If they're doing this within the same day, okay. But if they're doing this, one does the job today, and the next one 3 days later, the next one. By the time this whole process is done, it could be 6 weeks.
100%. And what I would say to that is that I would think that, again, it matters whether it's schirut or kablanut. Because if I hire you and your entire team, and I don't know, it's not like you're the manager of the team, but it's I hire you, Charlie, and Moshe all together as a group to do it, and you choose to have one of you do the work, the first leg of the work, and the second of you to do the second leg of the work, even though the first piece of the work is done on Monday and the last piece is finally laid 3 weeks later. That's your decision. But because I hired you as a group to do the job, all of you are going to be liable for the work of for the work, unless we can attribute it to a single individual. If we can attribute the fault to a single individual, then you're right. Then it'll be only on the single individual for the liability. But I think that even if there is an extended period of time, you would still that the group would still be liable. Okay, so that brings us to the final Mishnah of Bava Metzia, which addresses ownership of things growing on a vertical surface between a higher garden and a lower garden. We've seen this Mishnah several times throughout our learning together. We saw it in Gittin, according to the note in Masoras Hashas. So, but let's take a look and see what does it say. Let's remind ourselves of the law. So, Shtei Ginos Zoal Gavzu. We're going to have 3 different opinions. There are 2 gardens, one above the other, and there are vegetables that, in my backyard, I actually have a cliff at the back of my backyard. And so that divides between my backyard and the backyard behind mine. It's really a 15, 20-foot cliff. And that, as a result, I've got a big fence between my backyard and the cliff. But what if something is growing out of that cliff? And who gets the produce that's growing there? That's an important question. So, Yerek Beintayim, and there are vegetables that are growing on that vertical surface between the two gardens that are, one's a higher garden and one's a lower garden. So Rabbi Meir says Shel Elyon, they belong to the higher garden. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shel Tachton, Rabbi Yehuda says they belong to the lower garden. So Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda explain their viewpoint. Rabbi Meir, Im Yirtza HaElyon Likach Asafaro, if the upper garden wanted to, he could flatten his garden to make it the same level as the lower garden. And as a result, Ein Kan Yerek, there would be no vegetables on the wall at all. So as a result, that's why he says that it belongs to the upper garden, because it's the earth of the upper garden. Rabbi Yehuda, that is, Im Yirtza Tachton L'malos Esginato, Ein Kan Yerek. Well, you can make the argument in the exact opposite direction, according to Rabbi Yehuda. If you wanted to, you could fill up the lower garden with earth, and then there would be no cliff. Exactly. So Rabbi Meir responds, well, all right, even if you say that both of them have the ability to effectively preclude the other, Roan Mehechan Yerek Zechai, where does it draw nourishment? And the answer, of course, is it draws nourishment from the ground beneath the upper garden's land. And so as a result, it's the upper garden's land that is giving the nourishment. So it's the one that should have it. And now we get the third viewpoint. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Kol sheha elyon yachol lifshot es yado velitol harehu shalo v'ashar shel tachton. What we focus on is, what can the upper gardener reach with his hand? If he can reach it, so then we're going to give what's growing on that wall to the upper garden. And if he can't reach it, well, then we'll give it to the person who's in the lower garden. And Rashi helps us explain that if we take a look at the last word on the third to last line in Rashi, anything that the upper gardener is able to reach is with his hand, is it going to belong to him? It's because the earth of the upper garden is what provides the nourishment. So on some level, Rabbi Shimon is agreeing with Rabbi Meir's principle that where is the produce gaining nourishment? But v'hashar shel tachton. But he then says the rest belongs to the lower one. Why? As Rashi continues, ve'elyon hu gufei afkure mafker lahu ligabe. That the upper one effectively says, listen, I'm just going to give you the everything that I can't reach. Why? Shiganaihu lo, because it's embarrassing and demeaning to the upper one. Litol rishus likanes latoch shel chaver v'lilkot, that he would have to go down to the lower garden and ask permission to go into his garden in order to get his stuff. So as a result, he's going to say, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth the argument. I'm going to give you everything that I can't reach. And so that is Rabbi Shimon's view. And we're going to see that that's in fact how we're going to conclude. Amar Rava. So now Rava says Rava wants to explain Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda and what they're arguing about.
Is there a clear demarcation between the property of the first person, the property of the second person along the cliff, along this wall?
We're assuming that excellent question. We're assuming that that's the case. We're assuming that it's literally vertical, and we're assuming that everything on one side of that vertical line belongs to the upper garden, and everything on the other side of that vertical line belongs to the lower garden. And so as a result, the cliff is literally the border. Okay, that is effectively the assumption, because that's the only situation where it makes sense. Meaning, if the guy actually owns a piece of the lower garden, well, when you own a piece of property, again, in most circumstances, and we will see this, it's a nice introduction to the concepts that we'll see in Bava Basra. When you own a piece of a property that is surrounded on all sides, in general, you have a right of way to get to that location. But the issue here is you don't own any of the lower property. So you have no right of way. You have to ask permission to get to the bottom of the cliff. That's exactly the point. So you're exactly right to raise that. And it's for that exact reason that this is the difficult case. Because if, in fact, any of the bottom real estate after the cliff belonged to the upper guy, well, then it would be clear that the upper guy would get the whole thing. Okay. So
we discussed earlier in the
Mhm.
Gemara a few days ago, perhaps a week ago, if a person has a tree, let's say, for instance, and the roots are in his property, but the fruit or the branches hang to into the neighbor's yard. Who has the right to cut down those branches? Who has the right to the fruits, right? So in this case,
Correct.
if there's even if there's an upper and a lower garden, let's say the roots of the plant are in one property, and yet
So it's important to remember that there was a machlokas in that case.
right.
That there were a couple of different opinions, but
That's
you're
right.
absolutely right that those opinions, it would be an interesting thing to go through and see how do those opinions align with the opinions in this Mishnah. Because you're absolutely right that would be a relevant factor that we would want to check. That hopefully Rebbe Meir would say that we focus on the nourishment and therefore you go by where are the roots, but you're absolutely right that that's a very much relevant Gemara to this piece. Okay, so Amar Rava. Rava is going to now help us understand Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda's machlokas. Be'ikaro, when it comes to the roots, Kuli amalo pligi de elyon habi. Everybody agrees that the roots that are in the ground that belongs to the upper garden, that they belong to the upper garden. Ki pligi bidnofo. They argue only on the leaves, on what sticks out of the ground. Rabbi Meir Savar Shadei Nofo Basar Ikaro, that the Nofo, the foliage, follows is going to be treated like the roots. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Lo Amrin and Shadei Nofo Basar Ikaro. We don't follow the roots. The foliage does not necessarily follow the halacha of the roots. And Rashi explains, last Rashi on Daf Kuf Yechet Amabet, Lefi shehein tuluyin ba'aviro shel tachton pligi bahu, because they are hanging in the airspace of the lower one. That's why we're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda says that they belong to the lower one. Okay, and Titania. And we have and then we have a similar teaching in in two other brises. So the first of these brises is regarding one who sold a tree growing in his field, but he didn't sell the ground. So hayotzi min hageza umin hasharashin. If something grows out of whether it's the trunk or the roots of the tree that you've sold to somebody. So let's say I'll sell the tree to Ken, and now the Rebbe Meir's, this is going to be Rebbe Meir's opinion. Hare elu shel bala karka. So I sell a tree to Ken, but I still own my field. It's just that Ken has the right to take the tree away. But now that tree, which maybe was set up for for Ken to cut down for firewood, but it turns out that the tree grows a new branch or a shoot out of the ground from the roots of that tree. So according to Rebbe Meir, it all belongs to me. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda distinguishes. Min hageza, if it grows out of the trunk of the tree, meaning anything above the earth level, shel bal ha'ilan, well then it goes to Ken. Umina sharashin, but if it grows out of the roots, shel bal karka, then it belongs to the owner of the land. Okay. All right. So Utanan Nami, Gabi
So
Orla.
he's selling the tree and not the roots?
Say again.
It's a little odd. He's selling essentially the tree, but not the root of the tree?
Well, I'm selling you the entire tree, including the roots, but because this new tree grew out of the roots and appears as a separate tree, that when you cut down the tree, you don't have the rights to this new tree that is growing from the original roots. That's exactly right. That even though you effectively on some level are only entitled to the tree that's above the ground. You don't have the rights to, you have the rights to the root system if you want to support it, if you want to move the tree into your field, but you don't have the rights to a new tree that root system produces.
But why wouldn't I have the rights to excavate the roots in their entirety? I could bring an excavator and bring out.
Yes, you do, but you don't have. But the point is that because from an above ground perspective, it looks like that belongs to me. We're not going to give it to you. That's what it seems like the Rebbe Yehuda's viewpoint is based on. That basically, since if you were to just come into my field and say, are these the same tree or different trees? Most people will say, well, there are two separate trunks that grow out of the earth. Those are separate trees. Turns out that they may share a common root system, but when I sold you the one tree, I did not sell you the second tree because most people, if you were to ask them, are they one tree or two trees? They would tell you from looking, they are two trees, even though they share a root system.
A practical application, there are huge aspen forests in the western United States that are all the same tree. They've reproduced through underground stems.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly the point. That is considered multiple trees, and if you buy one of those trees, you don't then get all of them as a single unit. Okay, Utananami Gabi Orla Ki Gamna. And we actually have this identical machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Orla. Ilan hayotze min hageza umin sharashin. When you have according Chayev Ba'orla Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that if you have, and this is a radical position, so you gotta be patient with me, that if in fact you have a tree that is over 3 years old, and now it suddenly grows a new branch out of that tree, that new branch, or if it grows a new tree out of the roots, is considered new from an Orla perspective. And you need to give it 3 years before you are allowed to use it. And of course, in the 4th year, you need to bring it to Yerushalayim. That's what Rabbi Meir says. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we're going to make the same distinction. Rabbi Yehuda Omer min hageza patur, if it grows out of the trunk, so it's part of the same tree. And as a result, it's not independent, and it would be subject to the same laws of Orla as the main tree itself. And so as a result, if the main tree is more than 3 years old, there would be no problem eating the produce from this new branch. However, mina shirashim chayav. If the new tree grows out of the ground, underneath the ground, and so as a result, from all outward appearances, it seems to be a new tree, so then it's going to be subject independently to the laws of Orla. So why do we need to teach this both in connection with Orla and in connection with the sale of a tree? Utsriche, we do need it. If we only taught the first case of the selling of a tree case, maybe that's why he would treat that something that grows from the trunk as part of the tree, because it's money. And so as a result, we can be in money cases, the court rules, according to the letter of the law, we don't have to be lenient or stringent. We can just simply follow the simple law of al gabi orla de isura. But when it comes to orla, which is a prohibition, maybe Ema Modi Leila Rebbe Meir, maybe he would say, no, we got to be strict like Rebbe Meir and treat it like a new tree. V'i itmar baha. And if we only had the machlokas in connection with Arla, maybe the exact opposite would be the case. Baha kama Rebbe Meir. Maybe it's only in that situation where Rebbe Meir would say that we have to be strict because maybe it's a new tree. Aval b'ahi. But when in the case of the sale, maybe he would agree with Rabbi Yehuda. So tzriche, that's why, in fact, we need both perspectives. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon, we saw in our Mishnah that Rabbi Shimon says, Kol she'elyon yachol lifshod, anything that the upper gardener is able to reach, that's what he gets. Amri debe Rabbi Yanai, the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai says, Ubabachelo yeyanes, he can't strain in order to get it. It's what he can reach easily. That's what he gets. By Rav Anan v'item Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rav Anan, when some people say it's Rav Yirmiyah, he asked, Magia lenofo ve'ein magia leikaro, umagia leikaro ve'ein magia lenofo. My, what happens if you can only reach the roots, or you can only reach the stuff that grows out of the ground, but you can't reach the roots? Meaning, if the tree grows up and now you can reach some of the produce, but you couldn't reach the roots of the tree, would you be able to take that produce? Or vice versa? What if you can reach the roots, and so as a result, you have the potential to pull out the entire tree that's growing on that vertical ground, but the tree grows down, and so as a result, you don't have the ability to reach the fruit. So what's the halacha in that situation? So teku, that gets unresolved, and so as a result, we don't have an answer. And so now we conclude our last words of the Maseches. Amar Ephraim Safra, Ephraim the scribe says, Talmido shel Reish Lakish, who was a student of Reish Lakish, Mishum Reish Lakish, and he said it in the name of Reish Lakish, halacha ka Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. Amrua kamei de Shavar Malka. It was said in front of Shavar Malka, the king Shapur. Amar lahu, and he responded to them, Apiryon nimtiye l'Rebbe Shimon. We extend our graciousness to Rebbe Shimon. So what is that about? So let's take a look. It's essentially a way of saying that Hamelech Shapur really agrees with this, that this is a very kind way of treating things. It's essentially a compromise, and he is showing his respect. Now, Rashi tells us who this King Shapur was. So Li Nira, Rashi says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. We'll do this last Rashi, and then we'll with that we will finish.
What is he agreeing with Reb Shimon? In what situation? Which case?
Rabbi Shimon is saying that the halacha is that if in fact you can reach what's on the vertical from the upper garden, the upper gardener gets it. But what you can't reach, and certainly even if you what you can't reach, that will be kept by the lower gardener because it's in his airspace. And
but we still don't know whether that refers to roots or the fruit, right?
So
that was clearly
that the teku was if you the situation is if you can reach both, it clearly goes to the upper. If you can't reach both, then that's going to be teku. And so presumably whoever has it, grabs it, is going to get it. So presumably the person who is from the upper one will be, because he can reach part of it, what he can reach presumably he would get to keep if he took it. The question of what would happen if you go to court ahead of time, I'm not completely clear, but presumably, again, it would be based on who's considered muhsak in it. Some people actually don't have the language about what if you can reach the roots and not the foliage, because people would say, well, if you can reach the roots, then presumably you can also reach any initial growth. And so as a result, you were able to reach it when it was a baby plant. And so as a result, we'll give it to the upper person. So that's a further machlokus. But it would seem like basically, if in fact you can reach the roots, so then we would probably give it to the upper gardener. If the upper gardener can only reach the produce, we would probably still give it to the lower gardener. But basically, again, what we're saying, when we say the halachas like Rabbi Shimon, we're saying that in general, if the upper one can reach it, he gets it. If the upper one cannot reach it, it goes to the lower. And so now Rashi is going to tell us, who is this Shavar Malka? Li Nira, again, 9 lines up in the narrow lines. Li Nira Shavar Malka Mamish, that this person, Shavar Malka, was a literal person. Umelech Parasaya, he was the king of Persia. Ubaki Bedinim, and he was knowledgeable in laws. Of Amru Laha, the Rabbi Shimon, and it was told to him, the Rabbi Shimon, Demasnisin Kamei. It was said in front of him what the law that Rabbi Shimon gave. The Kalsa, and he praised it. The Amar, and he said, Apir Yom Nintaya, the Rabbi Shimon, we show graciousness to Rabbi Shimon. Yikabel Chen Mi'itanu, he should receive graciousness from us. Al Dabar Zeh, based on this ruling, meaning he thought it was a very nice ruling. The East Amre, but there are those who say Shavar Malka Shmuel, that Shavar Malka actually refers to Shmuel, the Bar Plugta of Rav, because in a few places in Shas he's called this. But that doesn't make sense to me, Rashi says. Demayam Rua ilaha de Rabbi Yishimon de Masnisan atu Shmuel lo haviyadala. Because why would this be said in front of Shmuel? Would he not know it, Lamasnisan? Would he not know this Mishnah? The ilaha de Ephraim Safra atu, and if the thing that was told in front of Shmuel was just that the statement by Ephraim Safra, Ilo Amar Reish Lakish Halakha Rabbi Shimon Shmuel Milo Kim Bedine Lemikalse Rabbi Shimon Adishama Mishmei de Reish Lakish de Hilchas Kavase. And what would prevent, why would he need to even hear if what we're referring to, what was reported to Shmuel, was the fact that Ephraim the scribe, who was a student of Reish Lakish, ruled this way? Does Shmuel need to hear that? We know that the halacha is like Shmuel when it comes to dinim. And so as a result, he has the ability to rule this way on his own. So as a result, I, Rashi, do not think that this refers to Shmuel, but rather it refers to a true individual king, Shapur. All right, so Hadron Allah.
The king Shapur would have been the second king of the Sassanian dynasty in Persia, who was constantly at war with Rome and was pretty violent in that, but seems to have treated Jews well.
He treated Jews well. All right, so
he would have been a contemporary of Rav Shmuel.
According to the note here, he ruled from 241 to 272 of the Common Era.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's about right. Yeah, and Shmuel would have been around at that point.
All right. So I'm sorry for not scrolling this last little bit, but Hadron Allah Chabayis Aliyah. V'salika la Maseches Bava Metzia. Hadron Allah Chabayis Aliyah. V'salika la Maseches Bava Metzia. Hadron Allah Chabayis Aliyah. Usalika la Maseches Bava Metzia. So wonderful to have completed Bava Metzia together, and God willing, stay tuned for tomorrow as we start Bava Basra. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yasher Koach.
Brooke to Yesh. Koach to you all.
Yasher Koach, thank you.
Masalto.